There we go. That's my cue. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We're here with a couple of our funding experts that are going to talk about kind of strategies that you can take on to help you deal with the upcoming funding cliff. I know a lot of us are talking about it, thinking about it, panicking about it. So we're going to talk about some things that you might be able to try at your school to help, sustain a high level of technology excellence in a year that might be a little bit trickier. But a couple housekeeping things from me right off the bat. If you do have questions throughout the session, feel free to pop them in the chat. If you don't know how to get to the chat, it's on the bottom bar of this window. You can put it in the chat. I'll be watching that as well as our presenters throughout the session. If we aren't able to kind of inject your question during the presentation, we'll get to them at the end, make sure everything gets answered before you pop out. The other thing is, if you do want that coffee gift card, please stick around until the end. We have a exit survey for you to take with just a couple questions. Shouldn't take more than 2 minutes, and that really helps us out. So be sure to stick around for that. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to our presenters, starting with Scott to kind of kick us off. Thanks.
Hey, Kate, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to get into this topic. It seems to be the topic right now when I'm talking to school districts. Super excited to be joined by my friends here, Eric Ogden and Brian Bagley, and we'll get into them. As we get started, you want to do a brief introduction, Eric?
Sure. My name is Eric Ogden. I'm our Director of Field Marketing and Contracts for Trifera, and just excited to share some valuable information with those here on the webinar here today, and joined by two great presenters here as well. So I'll pass it over to Brian to introduce himself.
Yeah, I'm Brian Bagley. I work with Trifera Financial Services on the financing side. Look forward to sharing some of our device as a service knowledge here today.
Awesome. Well, I'm super stoked to be jumping into this, and I'm going to share my screen here, and then we'll just jump in. So thanks for joining. Just as a reminder, if you do have any questions or anything as you go, do pop those in the chat. We'll have time at the end to kind of go over those questions, and Kate will be monitoring that as well. All right, let's jump into it. All right, can you guys see my screen here? Awesome. So surviving the funding cliff that seems to be hitting everybody right now is the topic for today, and we are very, very excited to bring this up. We're going to be talking about three things. You met my co-presenters. I'm going to be talking about the importance of long-term budget planning, and that's really kind of going to the conversation I'm having over and over and over with districts. I forgot to mention I'm a teaching and learning consultant with Trifera. I'm a former principal and tech director, and my job with Trifera is to work with districts all over the country on developing sustainable, long-term, high-quality technology initiatives, and that's what I do. And so the conversations I'm hearing now are, how can we justify this expense? How can we continue doing this? What's the negative impact? And I think I'm going to be going over a few things that I have found to be helpful in that process. Eric's going to be jumping in to talk about alternate funding sources. And like Brian said, he's going to be talking about device as a service, which is so cool. All right, long-term budget planning. I think it's really, really important. And I have the deep privilege to kind of see this lived out every single day as a company, that when we say we want to be the right providers, the right support for our schools that we work with, we really want to make sure that not only are we ensuring we have the right technology, but that right support that equals that bright future. And I think it really goes down to the question that I keep getting asked. And when I talk with tech directors, it's the question they're being asked right now by their boards, by their superintendents, by their CFOs. And is the technology making the instructional impact that you need it to? That is the key question I'm hearing over and over and over and over again. I think really where we kind of take that, and there's a few different areas, how can we make sure our technology is being implemented in a fiscally conscientious way, in a high quality way, but at the end of the day, is it making that instructional impact? And we're really going to kind of go into that. I'm going to start with a framing. This is the philosophy and mission statement for the education team, but I think it's also one that's shared by many districts, especially technology departments. We measure our success not based on how many devices we sell or for districts provide to students, to schools, but on how those devices are being used to enrich and transform learning. Because at the end of the day, that's really the goal. And I think that that is achieved by high quality implementation, long-term planning that really focuses on 4 key strategies. And we're going to go into that. First, we need to make sure that we are aligned with our vision. I love this, fueling educational dreams. So what we want to do is we want to have that vision that we have as a district. We have that mission statement. I was talking with a district yesterday that was talking about how they are so focused on equity and access for all students, closing the digital divide, closing the achievement gap that they're seeing in their students. And one of the ways that they're tackling that is to ensure that every single student has the best possible technology that's supported well through a high quality warranty, through all those things to achieve those goals. But really the intent is to say, hey, we have our goals, we have our mission statement, our North Star, let's align our technology to that North Star. We want to make sure that as we're making technology decisions, we are enhancing the instructional practice of the classroom. We want to make sure that everything is aligned to move together in the same direction. And then we really want to empower educators and students to kind of get them involved in specific objectives, specific things that they want to see with their technology engagement. I think that all of that really fosters that innovation and engagement that we want to see. And when we see that, it becomes so evident on a district that's really living this out. You just walk into a classroom and the students are so engaged in that technology is enhancing that instructional practice. And that's really where we want to get to. And I think you get there, one of the key ways is getting stakeholder input. I think it's incredibly important. We talk about data-driven instruction all the time in education. Data. But where are we getting that data? How are we engaging around data? Who are we leveraging data from is incredibly important. So it's incredibly important that as we're making our technology decisions, we are engaging and talking with the people who are going to be impacted. At the end of the day, every instructional decision we make is really about enhancing the dynamic between the teacher and the student. So we need their input. We also want parent input, especially if we're going to be doing a one-to-one take-home program. We want parent involvement. We want to make sure that our parents are informed on what the processes and procedures and what are they committing to? Why are they committing to it? Why do, as a district, have we committed to this vision and made all these investments into it? And that just drives this excitement. So that when you go to pass a bond or a referendum, or when you go to your board that says, hey, we've made this commitment, this investment, you aren't fighting. Everybody's already bought into the vision. They know what's going on. They know why you're doing it. So critically important. So we want to really kind of make sure that we're communicating effectively, that we're gathering feedback, and that we're really kind of closing that loop or engaging in that cycle where we aren't just collecting data for the sake of data. And we aren't just having internal discussions about those, but then we're sharing out and we're saying, hey, we got your input on the need to ensure that we have a much quicker turnaround for students to make sure that they have working functional devices in the classroom. I always say a one-to-one program is not a one-to-one program unless you can ensure that basically every student has access to working technology 100% of the time. 100% of the students, 100% of the time, very difficult. So how do you achieve that? And how do you get people to understand that that might take an additional investment? But that investment has the payoff of seeing fruit. So you want to circle around those things, and you want to really make sure that you're communicating how the feedback is informing your decisions. I think it's incredibly important. The other thing I see, and I talk to districts all the time, and this especially comes up in the world of ECF funds and ESSER funds, when we had all this unlimited money and all these districts bought all this technology. The thing that they weren't necessarily aware of, and especially boards, superintendents weren't necessarily aware of, that there's a cost to it. There's a total cost of ownership of these devices, or TCO, that goes beyond just that initial purchase price. Many times districts just bought $1 million worth of Chromebooks, put them out there and said, okay, great, that's done. Well, now those devices are 3-4 years old. They're realizing that there's a much deeper investment that's involved. So you want to really make sure that you're considering that throughout. You're considering the initial cost, the maintenance cost, the upgrades. Do you have any need for training? Do you have anything where you have a consistent replacement cycle? You know, one of the things I have it visualized here of that spike where it's like, okay, every 4 years I need $1 million to buy new devices to replace my entire fleet. Are you going to do that? Or are you going to flatten that out through something like a truncated replacement cycle, grade level replacement, or a device as a service, as Brian's going to talk about, whatever that is, but really making sure that you're thinking of the total cost of ownership throughout the entire life cycle of your program, instead of just this is a one-off purchase. I think when I look at really successful programs, they're constantly seeing that as the goal. They aren't just purchasing $1 million worth of Chromebooks. They're purchasing Chromebooks for every 6th grader and 9th grader this year. And really kind of articulating that so that it can really kind of say, okay, we're seeing the entire cost of ownership for the entire life cycle of these devices. Next, planning. I'm such a huge advocate, and I've seen it over and over and over and over again. The difference between an awesome implementation and a struggling implementation is, do you have a strategic plan? Do you have that plan that really looks at the entire life cycle? Are you prioritizing replacements, upgrades? Are you making sure that this technology is having the optimal impact? I see this a lot with districts right now. The AUE date's been kicked out about 10 years on Chromebooks. So a lot of districts are saying, hey, these Chromebooks, that's great. We can now get 10 years of life out of these Chromebooks. And my response is, the reality is the only way you're getting 10 years of use out of that Chromebook is if it sits in a cart and it's taken out once a year for testing. That's the reality. If it's being used daily, if it's a tool in the classroom that's enhancing instructional practice and engaging around concepts of equity and access and closing the achievement gap and the digital divide for students, that means it's being used daily. And if it's being used daily, the real life cycle of that device is 3 to 4 years. Because it's not that it has to be used, it has to be high functionally. It has to really work reliably, constantly. And that's where we have things like our warranty and things like that to kind of enhance that, so that we know you can have the confidence that for the entire life cycle of that device in your system, it will work 100% of the time, which is great. So there's really those 4 things. I think that we have that aligning technology with our vision, getting stakeholder power in tech decisions. It's such a powerful thing. Again, the difference in bonds and referendums and communicating with families between a district that's been communicating and been involving them in that process and those that aren't is incalculable. Ignoring the price of TCO, or total cost of ownership. And then where smart planning meets longevity, you gotta have planning. You gotta be strategic in your implementation. I'll just leave with this quote: technology will not replace great teachers, but technology in the hands of great teachers can be transformational. That's really what we're all about. So I do want to say our purpose is to improve lives and educational outcomes through technology. That's something that we live out, and I know that it's something that we can do. I'm so excited to pass this on to Eric Ogden, who's really going to break down some awesome funding sources. Eric?
Hey, thanks, Scott. Thank you for all of the insight there. Because you have been in the shoes of many of those people that are here on the call today. Thank you for that insight. Just some very valuable, some of it reminders, some of it, maybe stuff we haven't even thought about. So I'm excited to get into the next stage of this. Let me see here. Scott, if you could advance that for me. I don't know. I was trying the remote, but it didn't seem okay. Here we go. So real quick, I just want to talk. First of all, I know as most every school is dealing with the learning loss that has come through the pandemic and working to overcome that. It's really about taking a closer look at, maybe even from the very beginning, let's take a closer look at what our traditional funding sources are, and is there a different perspective or a different way we can look at some of these funding sources and potentially use them for the needs that we have in the coming year or two. For example, I want to start with Title I. In our world, which is classroom technology and services, we have seen that schools have traditionally used Title I funding for their one-to-one device deployments. And while that is a common use of Title I funding, we've also seen schools use Title I funding for STEM-related needs as well. So if you've got a STEM-related project and you haven't yet looked at Title I as that potential funding source, certainly we encourage you to do so. Skipping down to Title III, traditionally, Title III is really meant to help our ELL students. And while it is meant for that, there are some areas that maybe some schools haven't really looked at, and that is professional development or technology for those students. In fact, just as an example, El Paso ISD in Texas was able to utilize their Title III funding to provide their ELL students with Chromebooks. Now, granted, depending on your ELL student population percentage, whether it's less than 40% or greater than 40%, would determine whether that could be a targeted technology purchase or maybe more of a district-wide purchase utilizing your Title III funding. So granted, if you have some Title III funding available, that is one area that you'd want to consider that funding for, as it has been used for technology as well. Title IV, which has traditionally been utilized for STEAM-related projects, we've also seen schools utilize it for professional development as well. In addition to that, tech integration in the classroom, we've seen Title IV funding utilized for that. One of our favorite projects that we see schools take on is the Lou Interactive Playground, and we've seen this purchased through Title IV funding. And so, and we'll cover that Lou Interactive Playground on another webinar, and certainly encourage you to be on our other webinars for that. But certainly one of those areas that is maybe not thought of when you're looking at your traditional funding sources. Scott, if you can go to our next slide. So pandemic era funding is ending. Unfortunately, by the end of September, both our ESSER funds will be dried up, as well as, if you're a private school, EANS funding. And so it's right around the corner. So the big question is, next slide, if you could, now that we are in the throes of allocating all the remaining ESSER funds, and there's a whole lot of ESSER III that is being utilized. If you can go to the next slide, I'm sorry. So in this slide here, actually, you can see that in ESSER III alone, there's almost $122 billion in that funding. Now, the most recent slide I have available here from Future Ed that shows what the spend is on those ESSER funds. You can see that on average, states just a few months ago were spending
They don't tell you this, but all the guns at SHOT
over 54% of their ESSER funds have been spent, but there's still a big chunk of that available. And as we go through those funds over the next few months, of course, having to spend that by the end of September. And of course, if you're a private school, that funding is about $2.5 billion in EANS 2 funding. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, September 30th is that deadline for the spend on that. So obviously a lot of funding out there, but a lot of funding is getting utilized. And some of the schools I'm sure here on our call today have already used up all your ESSER funding. And so that may be the reason why you're on this call, because you want to find out where else can we tap into some money so that we can ultimately maintain our technology needs there in our school district. If you'll go to our next slide. This is, so as ESSER and EANS funds are drying up, of course, as we get to the end of September, they will be gone. And for some schools, this is going to mean a very serious drop off in funding. This Venn diagram here kind of breaks it down by state. Ultimately, what are some of the factors or the challenges that some schools are facing? As you can see on the right, there are a number of states that ESSER funding makes up 8% or more of your overall education dollars. Well, that's a big chunk that's ultimately going to drop off come September. At the top, you see that there are some districts here that have a significant number of students living in poverty. And on the left, in those states, we see that there are students that are attending schools that are high need districts. And when you bring it all together, there are some schools, and I mean, some states, in fact, 15 states to be exact, that are affected by all three of these factors. And this is going to have a significant impact on budgets and ultimately making it more challenging for those schools to be able to fund the technology that they need. And in fact, I read in an article this morning, I live in North Carolina, and in North Carolina, the head of the Department of Public Instruction had laid out that of the 110 districts in our state, 79 do not have the funding necessary to pay for their next device refresh. And maybe you're one of those school districts that's dealing with that right now, and you're looking at how do I replace the devices that I bought with ESSER funds, and now I don't have a way to pay for them going forward. And that's what we're going to explore a little bit more in our next slide as we talk a little bit about some other funding sources. But maybe you're one of the 13 states in the bottom right-hand corner here that you're in much better shape. You're not affected by these three factors that we mentioned here. And maybe you're in a state like Minnesota where the state has said, hey, look, we're going to make up for any shortfall on the federal side to make sure that our schools have the money they need. I know here in North Carolina, that's a big ask from our Department of Public Instruction. And I'm sure in your state, if you're in the same boat, it's probably a big ask as well. But of course, that has to pass on the state side. So before we ever get to there, what are we going to do now? So if you'll go to our next slide, Scott, let's talk about some of those funding sources. I'm just going to share a few with you. I'm going to briefly touch on each of these. There's the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. This provides over $1 billion through Title IV Part A. It has some specific earmarks, but it's also a little bit broader than even what I'm going to describe here. And that is to expand vital mental health services, provide additional support for districts to design and enhance initiatives that will promote safer and more inclusive and positive school environments for your students. Monies on this particular grant need to be spent by December of 2026. A popular grant that we see a lot of schools using for their projects is the 21st Century Community Learning Center grant. In fact, over the last 25 years, this grant has provided programs for districts and students that are in high need, high poverty communities, so that they can do after school programming, academic enrichment, and other development activities for those students. And you can incorporate technology into that as well. And so that may be an area that you would consider for a project that you have coming up from a technology perspective. There's the IDEA grant as well for early intervention and special education services. It's for children with disabilities and their families, as well as students with special needs. If you're needing an enhancement of your SPED budget, this is obviously a grant that one can pursue as well. I'll touch briefly on this one, the Google Challenge on Climate Innovation. This supports organizations to map emissions on a global scale, also to restore ecosystems. Schools are eligible for this grant funding as well. There's about $30 million in funding available here. So I encourage you to look into that if that's a project that maybe fits within that area. Also, and probably our most popular grant that we're seeing utilized today is the Rural Technology Educations Grant. This particular grant is for rural education technology projects, as well as assistive technology projects. So far, this grant has helped over 800 schools and 180,000 students, and they're still going strong. They've got a lot more that they want to support. And so if you're looking for a grant, this one is a really good one that we're seeing a lot of projects getting funded for through this grant. Last but not least on my list here is ECF Window 4. Now, I have a bunch of question marks there because it's simply this. We don't know if there's going to be a Window 4, but what we do know is a lot of the calculations that I've seen, the numbers that I've seen published, is that there's approximately $700 million still in ECF. And if indeed that is correct, 700 million would mean that they got to do something with that money. And hopefully that would be something that would find its way to our schools through, say, an additional ECF window. Now, like ECF Window 3, there were some restrictions as far as your school percentage, as well as what the need was. Is it meeting an unmet need? But I think through ECF Windows 1, 2, and 3, a lot of the unmet needs were met. So the question may be, is Window 4, if it becomes a reality, is it going to address areas of refresh for schools? Maybe schools that don't have additional funding that they can tap into. I don't know. Obviously, I don't have an inside scoop there, but I will tell you that if there is money available and the indications are that there's 700 million available, that we will likely see some kind of announcement before the end of June when Window 3 expires. That's what I have to cover. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it on over to Brian.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate it. And thanks, Scott. And thanks, Kate, for organizing this. I don't think I'm trying to get my remote working. So I'm here to talk Trafera Financial Services, really focused on device as a service. So what is device as a service? You may have heard of a flex lease. You may have heard of an operating type lease. There's device as a service. There's dollar out leasing. So I'm here really to talk about not as much about the type of financing structure, but really lifecycle management. Scott mentioned earlier in his presentation, lifecycle management. So how are we trying to institute some level of refresh discipline through device as a service? So making sure that we have timely, updated new devices that are currently under warranty while paying on an annual basis. So again, back to Scott's earlier point of not having $1 million spike every 4 years, but essentially spreading that over, let's say, $250,000 a year. You lock in your maintenance, your warranty coverage all into one service, and you're typically refreshing on a 3, 4, 5 year cycle, depending on what looks best what works best for your district. And again, it's not, as you know, we're going to go high level here, but please, if you have questions, you can always reach out to us. There's no question that we probably haven't heard when it comes to financing or device as a service. These situations can be very custom, but at a high level, cost effectiveness is probably the biggest thing with devices as a service. It allows you to acquire the latest and most advanced technology without incurring those upfront costs associated with purchasing. And the key thing is, when you're thinking about this, is do I want to own my technology, or am I going to be refreshing it on a 3 to 4 year basis anyway? Then if that's the case, definitely looking at a device as a service or some form of a financing structure would be good. So again, number 2, budget flexibility. Again, it spreads the cost of the technology out over the term or the planned use of the equipment. So matching the cash outflows with the use of the equipment. And again, in number 3, we can combine all of the maintenance, support, the software licensing, the cost of the device itself, all into this service. And it's included in one annual, monthly, or quarterly payment, depending, again, what works best for your district. The one really nice advantage that I like about device as a service is the scalability. So as enrollment changes, goes up and down, you can remove, add devices at will during the term. So if the following year you have 100 or 200 more kids coming in, you need more devices, you can add those devices coterminous to your current agreement. And of course, access to update technology. So you're moving the obsolescence risk from the school districts itself onto us as the device as a service provider. It's on us to swap out old technology, put new technology in, and then go find a place for that old technology. And again, equipment disposal is a huge advantage. With our offering, you set the devices in a central location, we come pick them up, take them away, and the new devices arrive. And again, you have that one clean annual payment. So what does this all mean from a device as a service standpoint? It really mitigates that risk associated with old technology and those hidden costs that Scott mentioned earlier in the call, the hidden costs of maintaining old devices, the time it takes to replace those devices, how long are they outside of a student's hands when it's old technology and there's breakage. So those types of things are all these hidden costs with old technology, and devices as a service can help with that. So what are some other creative budgeting solutions we have as far as devices as a service? So deferred payment plans. So if you're looking to get in line to get your devices on time this spring, we can get a plan in place for you now. That first device as a service payment wouldn't come until July 1st. So a nice deferral to get in line for your equipment. It arrives on time. You don't have that first payment until the new budget year, as an example. Certainly access to equipment. We are manufacturer independent, so we want to provide you with a service, and we want you to make the technology decision that best works for you at that time. So whatever manufacturer you're looking at, we'd like to provide that device as a service for that manufacturer. If you have old technology that you're looking to move away from, we have what's called trade IT. So we would be happy to take a look at your existing fleet. If it's an owned fleet and you're looking for a way to find a way to dispose of that technology in a responsible way, we can certainly help with that. We are constantly remarketing old technology, and we would be more than happy to provide access to our partners to purchase that old equipment and provide it as a credit against a new device as a service or lease or dollar out lease, whatever it is that works best for your district. And again, we have a white glove service. So all we expect at the end of a term in devices as a service is to have the devices put in a place, pick them up, and take them away for you, and the new devices arrive. You don't have to worry about the cost of freight, packing. It's just getting the devices in a central location. So those are some of the high level creativity. But again, my point to this is there's all different sorts of flexible things we can do to mitigate those big lumpy purchases that have to happen every 4 or 5 years, and really sit down and think about, am I refreshing my technology after 6 or 7 years, or am I on a consistent 3, 4, and 5 year schedule, which most districts are? So again, just in summary, what are the two biggest options that you'll hear about out in the market, and how can we help? So DAS Flex, really, you want to think about it as an ownership or a rental. You, at the end of the term, you can choose to purchase that equipment at the fair market value. You could renew the service for a period of time. Maybe it's another school year you think you can get out of the equipment, or you can simply return and upgrade to new equipment at that time. Then there's the dollar buyout lease, which I'm sure people are familiar with, where if you think you're going to keep this equipment for 6, 7, 8 years, maybe the dollar buyout is the best option. But again, you get away from the refreshing, matching your service and your warranty to the term of the agreement, and you'll have equipment outside of that warranty window. But again, maybe there's ways for you to continue to manage this and do a dollar buyout lease. So please reach out. We're here to help in any way, depending on what you're looking at. These can be structured very customized to each individual district, and hopefully meet the challenges and solve any issues that are coming up. Okay,
Well,
I think that's you.
That's me, back to me. Well, thank you guys. Thank you to our presenters, big time. And thank you to everyone for joining. I hope everyone on this call got a little bit of information. I know it was a lot of information, but if any of the solutions or services or even just help is appealing to you, whether that be long-term planning or funding or financing, all three of these guys are ready and eager to help you figure out how to figure out your budget in the next year. So please don't hesitate ever to reach out to us for all of that support. I'm going to launch our exit survey right now. Let's see if I can find it. There we go. Launch. All right. So please make sure to take that exit survey. I didn't see any questions in the chat, but I can pass it on to Scott or Eric or Brian if you have any closing thoughts on the topic for today.
You know, one of the things that I always really like sharing, talking with Brian is, you know, these options are one of the things that I think is great. When I was a tech director, I did not know about a lot of funding options. We did one lease, and it wasn't great, if I'm honest. But one of the things that I love about this, and one of the struggles I had when we went through our lease, is we were with a company that didn't view us as a K-12 organization. Whereas here, Trafera Financial Services, Brian, that is the world we live and breathe, and there's so much flexibility for that. And I love that the opportunity to kind of share with districts those unique opportunities that we can really do to kind of help districts find unique solutions to meet their needs. So that's something I always appreciate about you, Brian, and the services we offer. So yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Well, again, it was so great to have all of you here today. Please make sure to fill out that exit survey if you do want to get that coffee gift card. I'll get that sent over as soon as I can. But for the 100th time, thank you all so much. And we're here to help you with any of your budgeting issues or problems or worries, anything. Just come to us and we're here to help. So with that, we'll all say goodbye. I'll leave the exit survey up for a little bit longer, and we hope to see you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.